This is Out of the Box with your host, Jonathan Clark. Out of the Box, Sunday nights at 9 on Q1043.
He is one of the most iconic rock photographers ever, as well as a musician. For over decades, his work has graced hundreds of album covers, been featured in books, magazines, and newspapers. His artistic style has produced powerful photographic essays of Woodstock, where he was the official photographer, Monterey Pop Festival, as well as legendary photos of The Doors, CSNY, Jimi Hendrix, and scores of other legendary artists. You can find out all the info on Henry Diltz at henrydiltz.com, as well as morrisonhotelgallery.com, where he is a co-founder, and Be Mused. That's a show happening in L.A. It was just here in New York, but it's happening in L.A. Starting November 3rd, a career-spanning retrospective alongside a never-before-seen collection by myth-making photographer Henry Diltz. All the info, morrisonhotelgallery.com. Henry joins us now. You give new meaning to the phrase right place, right time.
Yeah.
Before we talk about your incredible photos, you were in the Modern Folk Quartet.
Yes.
Which then became the Quintet, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, we got a drummer. We were a four-part harmony folk group, like the four freshmen sing folk music. That was the early 60s.
And you guys had record deals. You toured with all these groundbreaking bands and artists in the 60s. Got to work with Phil Spector, who produced the band. And the photography came later. But tell me first, you were born in Kansas City, Missouri. When you started this, sort of direction towards the arts and performance, was it New York or L.A. that you went to first?
It was Hawaii. I went over there to go to college. And I was majoring in psychology, but at night I would go down to this coffee house called the Green Sleeves Coffee House, and I brought my banjo, and pretty soon, we were playing duos, trios,
right,
for a number of years, 3-4 years.
Well, tell us about that time in the band. I mean, this is what you wanted to do, I think, at the time. You were in your 20s, or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. You wanted to play music for a living. Photography was just not even there at that point, right? I
was a college student, for about 5 years, 3 different colleges, just trying to find out, what I was interested in. But folk music was the music of the day,
the moment,
of course,
definitely.
And the Kingston Trio were like the Beatles, to us.
Yeah.
And Pete Seeger was the granddaddy of folk music, and I was intrigued with the 5-string banjo, and bought one.
You played the Cafe Wah here in the Village, where the folk era really started to become the music of the moment, right? Or I'm thinking that, because I read a lot of books about Woody Guthrie and, his time in the Village and it's just a fascinating time to me, Tell me what it was like for you when you were here in New York at that time.
Well, the first time we played, it's the jazz club on
Village Vanguard? Village Gate?
Village Gate. Yeah, when we first came to town in 63, we played the Village Gate because we were sophisticated folk music. We wore suits.
And
4-part harmony. And so we could open up for jazz musicians, and we could open up for comedians. Folk, there was always that combination on, college tours or clubs. It'd be a comedian, a folk group,
Right.
And
but it really became a scene, right? It was just, Bob Dylan, and the list goes on and
Oakes,
on. Phil Oakes.
Lots of good friends.
But also the Troubadour in L.A., I think, at some point, right? Yeah. And then you kind of toured around the country, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we'd spend most of the year in a van touring, back and forth. A lot of college concerts.
Yeah. Like every good rock band in a van.
And folk clubs. Now, one thing people don't kind of realize these days, when you played a folk club back in the 60s, you always played the whole week. You played 6 days. Nobody does that now. It's it's one night.
Yeah, you did like a residence, for the whole week. Yeah. The band broke up, and you bought a $20 secondhand Japanese camera.
Yes,
correct me if I'm wrong. Was it a Nikon? What was it?
No, I think it was called a Pony. And then people tell me, well, Kodak made one called the Pony, but it wasn't that. It was a little, it was broken. It chewed up the sprocket holes on the bottom of the frame.
Oh, no.
It didn't hurt the picture, though, luckily.
Right.
And so I didn't know anything about cameras. We were in a motorhome on that tour, a Clark Cortez motorhome. So we were leaving a college town in Michigan, and somebody said, "Look, a secondhand store." And we said, "Oh, pull in automatically. You know, you got to run in there and buy some junk you don't need. You know,
right?
Curiosity,
Cheaply, yeah."
Yeah. And as we walked in the door, there was a table with secondhand cameras, and the guy in front of me, Cyrus Fariar, in the group, he said, "Oh, a camera. I'll have one of those." And I was right behind him. I just said, "Yeah, why not?" You know, I just kind of copied him and grabbed one.
Wow. And being in the band at that time and networking with all these other artists that you were playing with, around the country, that probably helped you get your first gig shooting the album cover for the Lovin' Spoonful, I'm assuming, right? You probably knew John Sebastian?
Yeah, no, I knew their producer, Eric Jacobson. Actually, we had been on a hootenanny tour. 40,
I love that word. I love that word.
41 nighters, you know, with a group of ladies called the Gospel Pearls.
Okay.
And he had a folk group and our folk group, and so we did 41 nighters. Well, I picked up this camera and started taking pictures of my friends in Laurel Canyon because that's where I lived, and all of my friends, by the way, were musicians. You know, it's a life, right? You know, so I would photograph David Crosby and Stephen Stills and Mama Cass and Neil Young while I was still a musician, because there was a little overlap there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I always say I photographed all my neighbors in Laurel Canyon, and one by one they became famous, which was incredibly happy accident.
When did you discover that you had this incredible ability to capture a moment, for lack of a better term, having an eye for photography? Because anyone can look through a camera and point it at someone or something, but it's a rare person that has the ability or the talent that you have. Like, how do you think that happens?
Well, it's kind of a framing Jones. You know, I like to frame. Because you can make a little, you can crop out this or that and focus in on what you want. And
right.
I don't know. I'm a Virgo, so maybe, it's a kind of Virgo's analyze. So it was a way of analyzing with my eyes, looking at stuff,
right.
and zeroing in on what I wanted to take. And then also my curiosity with people. I mean, I was a psychology major simply because I was very curious about people, other people, and life. I'm just always curious about that. And so I should say my Chinese animal, and everyone should look up their Chinese animal.
Okay.
Mine is a tiger. And tigers like to hide in the bushes and watch the other animals. And so that's pretty much what I did. I never was I'm here to take your picture. I'm the photographer. There are pushy photographers.
Yeah.
And they do well in their own way, but my way was just very quiet.
I think you have a point there, being a psychology major, being a musician, and wanting to sort of investigate sort of things. That's like a nice little combination of things that sort of pointed you in that direction.
Right.
And I think the fact that you had access to all of these artists over the years, you must have the ability, I don't know, you have the ability to hang with people, kind of like a good producer is in the studio with the band. You kind of get along with people, you become their friend, and they end up trusting you.
That's right. I always say, musicians, it's like a club. I mean, you meet a new musician and you're friends instantly. You belong to the club. And musicians really hang out a lot. I mean, they hang out in vans and airports, airplanes, recording studios, backstage. I mean, they really only play an hour or two on the days they play.
There's a lot of time off stage. Yeah.
A lot of hanging out, telling road stories, that kind of thing. And I was that way by nature, just because I'd been doing that for 4 or 5 years.
And you realize that you had this talent, but you didn't have any real schooling or instruction. Did you ever pursue that later on?
No.
Trying to get more knowledge about photography and how it works, or no?
No, I say that morning that we picked up those little $20 cameras, we got back in the motorhome, and my friend Cyrus said, let's pull into the next drugstore. I'll buy film for all you guys. And he came out with these yellow Kodak boxes, handed me mine. I
remember them. Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, what about these numbers on the camera? How do I set those? And Cyrus said, well, look on the box. It says Sunlight 250 at 8. I said, oh, okay. Oh, here's 250. Here's 8. Let's go out in the sunlight and take pictures. And that was it, kind of hit or miss.
I'm going to hold some of these iconic photos up to you, and the cameras here, please. For our radio listeners that can't see these, we'll post the video later on. So please describe what we are seeing and the story behind these shots. Okay, first is Paul McCartney and Linda Eastman in an embrace.
Yes. Well, I knew Linda as a fellow photographer long before she married Paul. In fact, I met her at Modern Age Photo Studio here in New York.
Modern Age. I remember Modern Age.
Getting my film developed, and she was in there, and we talked. And, we'd have lunch once in a while. I'd see her, on one coast or the other. And then one day I read she married Paul McCartney. Wow. And then a little while later, about a year later, she called me and said, could you come out to our house in Malibu? We need a picture of both of us. Of course, she was Paul's photographer.
Right,
but she needed to be in the picture as well. That was for the Ram album that she sang on.
Wow.
And so, we took those pictures, and it got used as a cover of Life magazine.
Fantastic. 1971.
That's
fantastic.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, now this one people have seen all around the world for decades. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock in that famous white leather fringe jacket with a matching white left-handed Stratocaster.
Yep, he's playing the Star Spangled Banner there. Monday morning,
What time was that?
7, 8 o'clock, maybe, something like that. I mean, he was supposed to go on Sunday night to close the show, but they were so backed up, he didn't get on there kind of until dawn, Monday morning.
And how long were you at Woodstock?
I was actually there 2 weeks before the concert. I was hired by Michael Lang to document the building and building the campgrounds, the hog farm, and
before, during, and after, right?
Yeah, all those hippie carpenters hammering and sawing and building a great big stage at the bottom of that natural amphitheater.
So his performance, was it, how could you, you're,
spellbinding.
I'm looking at you had to be you're on stage, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
God, was it loud? Was it, tell me about it.
No, I was standing right behind an amp.
Okay,
not right in front of it.
Right, yeah.
It was, that crowd of almost 500,000 people now was maybe, 50,000 people in front of the stage. A lot of people left Sunday night.
Right.
So that hillside, which was green alfalfa a week before, and then was 450,000 faces there, was now just mud.
Right.
A muddy field. And the sound from these huge speakers went out and bounced off of that hillside. Instead of absorbing the sound, it kind of reflected the sound.
Right.
And so it was really quite loud.
You were a really lucky man to have witnessed that.
It was a fun moment.
Okay, I'm going to hold this one up that everyone knows as well. Which one? Tell us about this one.
That's the doors in the Morrison Hotel window in downtown L.A.
And I love that the rooms are $2.50 a night.
Right, $2.50.
Right, $2.50 a night.
It was for winos to sleep it off, really.
Incredible. So tell me about the setup for that photo.
A transient hotel. And someone had told us about that, and we went down to see it. Went down there with Jim and Ray. Walked in, it was great. And we said, let's bring the band back in a couple of days. And when we walked in with the band, nobody was in the lobby, just a guy behind the desk. And I said, we're just going to be over there taking a few photos. And he said, no, you can't shoot any photos without the owner's permission. And the owner was a famous slumlord.
Oh,
everyone was terrified of him.
Right.
So I said to the doors, hey, you guys, we got to walk outside. I'll have you stand in front of that window, and then they can't stop us. We're on the sidewalk. So we did. We walked outside, and they were standing in front of the window, and I looked through the window. I saw a big light go on in the lobby, and I looked. I said, that's the guy at the desk. He went up in the elevator. That's the elevator light. Quick, run in there. And they ran in there, and one roll of film, 5 minutes, and we were out of there.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Here's another very famous album cover. Tell us what we are looking at here.
Crosby, Stills, and Nash for their very first album.
For the debut album.
Tell
us about the porch, the couch, etc.
Well, they had no pictures whatsoever, even to announce they were singing together. So we went out one afternoon with the three of them.
And they were at Woodstock, too, though, right? Did you see them at Woodstock? And was that after Woodstock or before? The photo.
The photo was before Woodstock.
Oh, okay.
I think the album came out just after.
Right, okay.
Yeah, because when they played Woodstock, I thought, there's my friends. I just did their album cover, which wasn't actually out yet.
So
but we were driving around West Hollywood just looking for places to get out and take a few shots, and we found that little old house with a couch right there in front of it. So they jumped on the couch, and we took pictures. Then we had a slideshow, and everyone said, wow, even though we weren't trying to take an album cover, that would be a good album cover, but they're sitting backwards there. It's Nash, Stills, and Crosby. So they thought, well, maybe we can turn it over, but then Stephen will be playing left-handed, and that would be a controversy forever.
Oh, because you wanted the title underneath to match how they were sitting. Yeah.
They decided, after that picture, they decided to name themselves Crosby, Stills, Nash, and that's Nash, Stills, Crosby.
Right.
It'd be, confusing. So I said, hey, let's just go back. You jump on the couch in the right order.
Do it again.
Click, 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 5 minutes. And we went back, and the house was gone.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, the house was bulldozed to the back of the lot.
Wow, condemned and then see you later,
it's like
right?
Dave Paradise put up a parking lot.
Yeah.
Joni Mitchell.
Well, we're going to get to Joni in a second, but first, these are two of my heroes of all time. It looks like Keith Richards and Ronnie Wood in a private plane, and you had to be sitting right across from them.
Yes, I was.
Tell us about that day and what happened.
Well, I spent 2 weeks touring with Ron Wood's solo group called the New Barbarians, and Keith was in the group. And lucky for me, the road manager, Richard Fernandez, had been the Eagles road manager, and we'd been on the road plenty of times, and he knew that I like to take pictures on airplanes and in cars, and also. So on that day, Keith and Ron and Ron's wife and Keith's lady friend were going to fly from L.A. to San Diego for the last concert. At the last minute, Keith's wife said couldn't go, and so my friend Richard said, Henry, you go in the plane. Instead of a 3-hour bus ride, I got to ride 45 minutes in the airplane because he knew I'd take pictures, which I did.
Right.
So that was fun. But I'd been on the road for 2 weeks with him, so we were all pretty good friends.
Right. That's just such an iconic photo, and there are so many I want to talk about, but this one in particular, a woman who has always been just sort of legendary, but has just sort of become almost even more so in the last couple years.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Joni Mitchell. And this photo here, correct me if I'm wrong, Laurel Canyon. She's leaning outside of a window with the window open. It's Joni Mitchell.
That's her house, the very, very, very fine house that Graham Nash wrote the song about.
Correct.
They both lived there. Yeah, she was so great, And that was a time, before that lovely time in the 60s, 70s, late 60s, early 70s, so there were songwriters and there were singers. Frank Sinatra never wrote any songs. Elvis Presley never wrote any songs. There were songwriters, and then there were singers. When I was doing folk music, we didn't write folk songs. They were 100-year-old songs you would find.
Traditional. Yeah, right.
But what happened in 1964 when the Beatles played Ed Sullivan, all the folk groups, including ours, saw them on TV. We pulled off the road into a motel, just before 8 so we could watch Ed Sullivan. Because we'd heard about these guys, but and there they were shaking their heads and having so much fun and singing a song they wrote. And we said, look, it's an electric bass. We had a stand-up bass. The week after that, we got an electric bass.
And like a million other boys rent to the music store, right?
Yeah, so many folk groups, went electric. And then you had the Byrds and the Buffalo Springfields. Those guys were folk singers.
Yeah.
And then the same with us. We went electric. We got a drummer. This was the new music. And it was, you write your own music. That's what was amazing. The Beatles didn't write their songs in the beginning.
Did
right?
covers, yeah.
Yeah, Blue Suede Shoes, Roll Over Beethoven. But then they did start writing songs, and it kind of opened the door for everybody to write songs. Now, instead of hearing Joni sing some Tin Pan Alley, Moon, June, Spoon song, you get her mind and her heart and her observing, nature and her words, her poetry. It was so great, and that started, Neil Young, James Taylor,
right? Yeah,
Stills.
Henry Diltz is with us. You can find out all the info on this legendary work as a photographer at henrydiltz.com. There's an event happening in L.A. called Be Mused, starting on November 3rd. You can get all the info at the morrisonhotelgallery.com. We are now in the age of instant communication. Instant photos right after they are taken. They are posted online where the whole world can see it right away. Is it hard to make sure that your photos are not copied and you say used without permission and getting credit and things like that? Is it a nightmare to deal with? Or
no, it's not been a nightmare for me. I don't know why. Some people are very uptight about it. Want to put a big watermark, put their name there, and they worry about it. I don't worry about it, and it's not a problem.
And I know you have an Instagram account. Do you actually take photos with a smartphone ever, or do you always use a camera?
I have an iPhone, and sometimes I'll use it, but I have a little pocket Canon.
Okay.
In the 60s, late 60s, 66, I started. I had a 40-pound bag, I had two bodies, two Nikon bodies, one black and white, one color, and about 5 lenses, a spot meter, a flash, batteries.
The whole thing.
Film, 40 pounds. Now, the whole thing is just right here in this little tiny pocket camera. I love it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There are so many more unreal photos that people can see at this event, and I saw a few of them. James Taylor, Beastie Boys, Spinal Tap, Chili Peppers, Ice-T, so many more. Henry, it's a real honor to meet you and speak with you. Everyone go check out his stuff, henrydiltz.com, morrisonhotelgallery.com. And if you happen to be in L.A., starting on November 3rd, you can check out the show called Be Mused at the Morrison Hotel Gallery there. So, Henry, thank you so much. A real honor to speak with you.
Yes, great talking to you.
This is Out of the Box with your host, Jonathan Clark. Out of the Box, Sunday nights at 9 on Q104.3.